the waters under the heaven be gathered together into one place, and let the dry land appear, and it was so. And God called the dry land earth, and the gathering together of the waters called he seas. And God saw that it was good.
Hello and good evening. Welcome to the first webinar of 4 celebrating Laudato Si Week 2020, celebrating 5 years of Laudato Si on care for our common home, the encyclical by Pope Francis. Hosted by Living Laudato Si Philippines, entitled Planetary Health is Human Health. Thank you for taking the time to join us tonight from the comfort of your own homes from all over the world. I hear we have about 20 countries tonight. Thank you so much for joining us, and rest assured we will be holding the webinar in English most of the time. Now to begin, let us first recognize that we are in the presence of the Lord.
A prayer for our earth. All-powerful God, you are present in the whole universe and in the smallest of your creatures. You embrace with your tenderness all that exists. Pour out upon us the power of your love that we may protect life and beauty. Fill us with peace that we may live as brothers and sisters, harming no one. O God of the poor, help us to rescue the abandoned and forgotten of this earth, so precious in your eyes. Bring healing to our lives that we may protect the world and not prey on it, that we may sow beauty, not pollution and destruction. Touch the hearts of those who look only for gain at the expense of the poor and the earth. Teach us to discover the worth of each thing, to be filled with awe and contemplation, to recognize that we are profoundly united with every creature as we journey towards your infinite light. We thank you for being with us each day. Encourage us, we pray, in our struggle for justice, love, and peace.
So tonight's focus for the webinar is to talk about the environmental health and how it affects our health, our human health, and how we in turn affect the earth once again. The COVID-19 pandemic is the latest example of how environmental degradation and abuse can affect both individual and societal well-being. We also want to pursue in this webinar how to create a better society for post-COVID-19. So my name is Winken Hilito, and I am the Media and Communications Officer for Living Laudato Si Philippines, and I will be your facilitator tonight. So before anything, let's talk about the house rules. Now, these house rules are just implemented to ensure a smooth and positive experience for all of us in this webinar tonight. So the first rule is, yes, you may interact in the comments in the chat option here at Zoom, but please be mindful of everyone. Please be sensitive. You can introduce your name, where you're from. We would love to be able to interact with you. And you can also share your insights as well, but please again, be mindful of everyone else in the webinar. Now for any questions, we will be having a Q&A session after all the speakers have spoken. Now, if you want to ask a question while the speaker is talking, you may actually look down your screen and press the Q&A tab. And you may type in your questions. This is to ensure that we will be able to answer as many questions as we possibly can tonight. Some of the questions will be answered by other members of Living Laudato Si Philippines. And also, lastly, please be mindful of your comments. So these are all the house rules this evening. Now may I introduce Mr. Rodney Galicia, Mr. Rodney Galicia, the Executive Director of Living Laudato Si Philippines. Sir Rodney.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you, Winkin. Thank you to our esteemed panelists, Dr. Renzo Guinto, Dr. Rogelio Bayod, Karen Ibasco, and Yeb Sanyo, one of our friends. And we welcome you on behalf of the climate of the Living Laudato Si Philippines, together with the Global Catholic Climate Movement. This one is the third webinar of Living Laudato Si Philippines. And of course, today we just launched the Linggo ng Laudato Si 2020, or the Laudato Si Week. This is because we are celebrating the 5th anniversary of Laudato Si on Care for a Common Home of Pope Francis, a document, a love letter to the world, not only to Catholics, but also to the whole world, to the faith communities, and everyone. This webinar is in coordination with, of course, collaboration with Greenpeace Southeast Asia, the Philippine Association of Campus Student Advisors, and of course, PH Lab. And of course, Living Laudato Si Philippines was founded last 2018 and co-founded by Brother Armin Luistro, FSC, and yours truly. And our main mission is vision. Of course, we see a world that is living Laudato Si. You know, Laudato Si as a way of life, and sustainability is our future. And we commit to build capacity and foster more partnerships, networks in mainstreaming and living the principles of Laudato Si as framework, as tool for sustainable development for our lifestyles. And of course, to influence and partner with relevant institutions, especially faith-based organizations, to divest from destructive industries and shift towards financing solutions that promote sustainability and social justice. And brothers and sisters, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to give us her message, Miss Earth 2017, Karen Ibasco.
Hi, good evening, everyone, to all our online viewers. Truly, it's an honor for me to celebrate the 5th anniversary of Pope Francis' encyclical letter on ecology, on care for our common home, with all of you. Even in the midst of this pandemic, where everyone is staying in their respective homes on enhanced community quarantine, we can still come together and share valuable learnings and insights to our planet for us to protect. Even before I became known to be a person who stands up for the environment, as a follower of Christ, I deeply understood that nature is a gift from God. The beauty of creation reflects the greatness of the Creator. Nature is God's way of providing for the needs of humanity. Without it, it would be impossible for mankind to survive. We are all called to be good stewards of God's creation, to care, nurture, and cultivate. Generations may differ from each other, but this calling will never be altered. It stands throughout generations so that harmony can be achieved with humanity in nature. Achieving scientific breakthroughs through generations or through inventions and discovery to better the lives of mankind is not bad, but the abuse of it is. At this moment, the whole world is facing a crisis, and we are also facing a climate crisis. Global warming and climate change are getting worse every year due to human activities. And the worst part is the ignorance and apathy of a lot of people. The intensified effects of natural hazards claim the lives of people globally, and that's very much felt in the Philippines, since we're quite vulnerable to climate change. Climate change is a moral issue. The real problem is not climate change, but humanity itself. May this webinar be maximized to share each and everyone's expertise and experiences to help better understand the steps to be taken and equip all of us to battle this world threat. Together, our collective knowledge would reach a wider range of audience to come to a common ground of understanding and share the same vision that would lead to collective action and make a difference, not just for this generation, but also for the generations to come. Tonight, we have competent and credible speakers lined up for us. Let's all be ready and welcome them each and everyone. Good evening.
Thank you so much, Miss Karen Ibasco, Miss Earth 2017, for setting the tone for tonight, for reminding us that this is all about collaboration, that tonight it's not just a webinar, it's also a dialogue. So thank you so much for reminding us of the importance of harmony with nature. Now moving on to our speaker who will talk about our first topic for tonight, Dr. Renzo R. Guinto. So he will be talking about planetary health is human health, COVID-19 in the Philippine context, the issues in biodiversity that relate to COVID-19, and how to move forward in this new normal. Now, Dr. Renzo is a Filipino physician working for global health and sustainable development. Dr. Renzo Guinto is the Chief Planetary Doctor of PH Lab, a local think and do tank for advancing the health of both people and the planet. An Obama Foundation Asia Pacific leader and Aspen Institute New Voices Fellow, Dr. Renzo recently finished his Doctor of Public Health degree at Harvard University. For his doctoral dissertation, he investigated the concept of climate-smart health systems in coastal municipalities in the Philippines. Dr. Renzo is the youngest member of the editorial advisory board of the Lancet Planetary Health, the world's first planetary health journal, co-founder of the Emerging Scholars Network of the Planetary Health Alliance, and advisor to the Forum on Climate Change and Health of the World Innovation Summit for Health, or WISH. Everyone, please welcome Dr. Renzo.
Thank you, everyone. Magandang gabi po sa lahat ng nasa Pilipinas. Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are in the world, no? On Earth. And it's a privilege to be speaking right after Miss Earth. So it's a high bar to match. Let me share with you my slides first. Nakikita niyo na po ba? Okay na po? Great. Wonderful. First and foremost, thank you po sa Laudato Si Philippines or Living Laudato Si Philippines for this wonderful opportunity to share about planetary health. I was so thrilled to hear that the theme for this inaugural webinar in this Laudato Si week is planetary health is human health. And I think, with what's happening now in the world, there's no doubt that this message rings so true now more than ever before. But also planetary health, I firmly believe, is the compass that we need for our post-COVID future. So while right now we're still trying to address COVID-19, we're trying to address its spread and treat patients in hospitals and trying to address the side effects of the lockdowns that are happening in different parts of the world, we have to start talking about the post-COVID future. What will be happening after this pandemic is over, because there's really no way of going back to our old habits. And instead, let's recreate the future, and planetary health can be that guide. I just want to start first by remembering all the lives that have been affected so far by COVID-19. Here you will see, this is from the website of the Johns Hopkins University. More than 4 million people are already affected by COVID-19. It is a gross underestimate because, as we know, not just in the Philippines, but in many parts of the world, testing is still very limited. And so we can expect that there are more people around us that have COVID-19, albeit asymptomatic, which is a good news. It means not everyone will need to be hospitalized, but still it's a lot of people that are being affected right now. And unfortunately, we should expect that more people will be affected in the months and even years to come. So perhaps because we're talking about the Laudato Si, climate change, the first question that came to your mind is the coronavirus linked to climate change, to environmental degradation, to the ecological crisis that we're facing? Let's try to answer that question. And this is an invitation on Earth Day in April 2020, the 50th anniversary actually of Earth Day. I wrote this article, Lessons for the Post-Coronavirus World, where I tried to unpack these connections between climate change and COVID-19 And I'm going to talk about some of the main points from this article. The first is that we know that in a warming planet, infectious diseases become more active, become more dynamic. The old diseases are expected to come back, but there will be new diseases that will also emerge. So really, climate change and infectious diseases are very much interconnected. It's hard to say that COVID-19, as it is, or in itself alone, is linked to climate change. But we know that in the next 50 years, there will be more epidemics that will occur if we don't address climate change and if we don't prepare our communities for these infectious diseases. But in addition to climate change, in addition to the warming planet, we know that we have so many activities, human activities, that lead to the emergence of new infections. So as we know, there are right now, the idea is that COVID-19 started in a market in Wuhan because people there and people in many countries are still consuming wildlife, pangolins, snakes, etc. And that behavior, when we consume wildlife, tightens the human and animal interface. And that means the transfer of diseases from animals to humans become more likely. And that is what we call, maybe you've heard of this term already in the news, zoonoses, diseases that are transferred from animals to humans. And this graph just shows to you that a small virus that is invisible to the naked eye can be spread around the world because of animal to human interaction and then rapid mobility of humans worldwide. So, a virus can move from, Wuhan to the United States in a matter of, days or weeks or months. But also what COVID-19 is sharing or showing to us is that our healthcare systems are really not ready. We've underinvested in our health workforce. Now we're seeing health workers not just being burnt out, but they're dying because at the end of the day, they're also humans being exposed to the virus. But also I put health there in the parenthesis because I think it's not just the healthcare system that is affected, or hospitals or our clinics. I think it's the global care system, our care for each other, our care for ourselves, and our care for the planet, which is really fractured because of COVID-19. But also, I think COVID-19 is just a magnifying glass showing to us what's really is missing and deficient in our care system. For instance, now we're realizing how important house care work is, and in the current economy, we don't really put value on the care that our mothers provide inside the household. But now we're realizing that it's even so important to have to make sure that within our families, we have the ability and the resources to care for each other when everything else around us is shut down because of an economic lockdown. It's also important to recognize that in our response to COVID-19, we might unintentionally be creating new forms of pollution. And there are already reports showing that in the ocean, you can find already a lot of these surgical masks and other PPEs. And so it's very important that in our caring for patients, we also make sure that we care for the planet at the same time, and we don't create a new problem in trying to solve another one. And then here, another link between the environment and COVID-19 is the temporary and initial apparent environmental benefits that we are seeing now. There are reports that because of COVID-19, there are many factories and coal-fired power plants that have been shut down as a result of the lockdown. And it led to massive improvements in air quality in places like China. And even in Metro Manila, where perhaps many of us reside and familiar with in terms of its air quality or lack thereof, now you can see the mountains of Rizal from Metro Manila, blue skies and the clearing of air. But this is an important message that I want to give. we have to be very careful in romanticizing the apparent ecological benefits of the pandemic. It just tells us that if we don't do decarbonization, environmental protection in an intentional, planned, and sustainable way, people will be dying. And that is in the form of a pandemic. But if we do it slowly and gradually and in a planned way, we can not just improve our environmental situation, but also protect human lives in the short and long run. So again, that's a word of caution. And I'm pretty sure this perhaps is the most popular graph right now in social media. Let's flatten the curve. We need to spread out the cases of COVID-19 so that we don't overwhelm the capacity of the healthcare system, our ICUs. We have limited ventilators. We have not that many doctors and nurses. But I think we need to flatten this curve too, this curve of carbon emissions, our ecological footprint, because we cannot also exceed the Earth's capacity, that horizontal line. And so this is a very interesting parallelism between COVID-19 and climate change. And I found this cartoon very amusing, but also very scary. There you can see doctors already, happy that we've already conquered COVID-19. That might be the situation in 2 years' time. But behind them is a much bigger, taller, and much scarier curve of climate change and its wide range of health impacts. I'm not trying to scare people, but I'm also just trying to say this is a long-term crisis that we are about to expect and see if we don't act now. And so, as a physician, I always ask myself, who is my real patient? Right? And I think it's not just people, it's not just individual citizens, it's also the planet that nourishes our health and well-being. And we need to have this, broad view in terms of addressing health in this century. It's not just about people, it's also about the planet. And I love this article by Arundhati Roy, who is an Indian writer. She said that the pandemic is a portal, a gateway between the old world and the next. But in this journey, in this road to the new world, we need a new compass, and it cannot be the old frameworks that we have been taught in the old world. And what is that new compass? That new compass, or even new compasses, have already been given to us as early as 2015. Today, we are commemorating the 5th year anniversary of Laudato Si, perhaps one of the greatest encyclicals that a pope of the Catholic Church has written, this one on the care for you, or for a common home. But I also want to let you know that in 2015, the academic scientific community also released a report on planetary health. Why there is it is important for an integrated view that brings together human health and the Earth's health. And also in the political realm in 2015, as we know, the Paris Agreement was passed and signed by all countries in the world in that historic conference also in 2015. So 2015 is really a landmark year for the communities of faith, for the scientific community, but also for the political community, the community of nations. I just want to share with you some of my pictures. So I was privileged to actually get hold of a copy of Laudato Si in Italian when I visited Italy in 2015. And, Rodney was there, Yeb was there during COP21 in Paris. Many of us were there. And right after the Paris Agreement was signed, my first stop the day after is the Vatican. And so I was able to listen to Pope Francis's message about the success of the Paris Agreement, the promise that it brings to the world. I was able to hear that right there in, St. Peter's Square, which interestingly is vacant now and with no people in the time of the pandemic. So that's a very historic, and I feel very blessed to be in that moment. And planetary health is human health is also, I think, the message of Pope Francis in the encyclical. As you can see there, the human environment and the natural environment deteriorate together. We cannot adequately combat environmental degradation unless we attend to the causes related to human and social degradation. In fact, the deterioration of the environment and of society affects the most vulnerable people on the planet. The impact of present imbalances is also seen in the premature death of many of the poor. So really, Pope Francis is very clear. The health of the planet and health of the people are just one. And we've been talking a lot about social distancing in this day and age. And I think Pope Francis too was talking about social distancing, not between people, but between people and the planet. And in the 49th paragraph, he was talking about this lack of physical contact and encounter between people and planet, encouraged at times by the disintegration of our cities. You know, right now, more people on Earth live in cities, in urbanized settings, and we're basically detached from the natural environment, from the forest, from the ocean, from the river. And that can lead to a numbing of conscience and to tendentious analysis which neglect parts of reality. At times, this attitude exists side by side with a green rhetoric. So, you know, we end up talking about green economy, green, you know, healthcare, green, you know, it's greenwashing all over without really appreciating the oneness of human and the planet's health. Today, however, we have to realize that a true ecological approach always becomes a social approach. It must integrate questions of justice in debates on the environment so as to hear both the cry of the earth and the cry of the poor. Again, this is the time, you know, to, you know, right now we're doing social distancing, but we have to be much closer to the earth in this day and age of COVID-19 and much more beyond. So planetary health is, again, a new concept that brings together human health and the people's health. It's a reaction to the term public health. Public health, as we've been hearing a lot right now in the COVID-19 response, public health is about the health of people, period. But what happened is that in the past century, we've improved the health of people more or less at the expense of the planet. Our healthcare systems are not necessarily cognizant of its environmental impact. Our food systems are providing food on the table of every person, but also at the expense of air, water, and soil. And our economies really have brought tremendous progress to many people around the world, but again, at the expense of the natural environment. And see here, this is an invitation, especially to those who are in academia, the young people, the students listening to this webinar. We are a growing community of scholars and practitioners from many disciplines that really espouse this integrated vision for people and the planet's health. There's so many discussions about, is it a field? Is it a policy framework? Is it a new way of communicating all these issues? I think to simplify the discussion, it's really an integrated vision for the health of the human civilization and the state of the natural systems on which it depends. Again, that integration, that interconnectedness is so much more pronounced and visible now than ever before. I'm not going into detail with this graph, but it shows to you that a lot of the health problems that we see right now are in one way or another shaped by ecological forces that, by the way, we also disrupt through our many human activities. You can see on your left, consumption. Our consumption patterns have really changed. Ecosystems leading to pollution and biodiversity loss and land use change. We've turned every forest into subdivision and golf course and all these other forms of human habitation. And as a result, diseases are emerging and spreading. Malaria, for example, is going to places where they don't really naturally thrive, or toxins or chemicals being released to the environment. For example, the melting of the ice caps in the Arctic are releasing a lot of toxic chemicals that have been buried in ice for millennia. And these are just some numbers, again, not to scare you, but with a hope to mobilize everyone to act. 250,000 deaths each year due to climate change, $30 billion health costs due to climate change. These are all underestimates. And so we can just expect, if COVID-19 is already very expensive, the human and economic cost of climate change will be much, much more in the years and decades to come. In understanding planetary health, it's so important to visit or to understand this concept of the planetary boundaries. And right now, there are 9 planetary boundaries that have been identified by the Stockholm Resilience Center in Sweden. And as you can see in this graph, 2 out of the 9 are already in red. That means we are already close, or we've already breached and violated these boundaries. And what are those? Biosphere integrity. The past century has seen the fastest rate of extinction of creatures great and small. And we know that biodiversity is so important for human and planetary health. You can see also biogeochemical flows are already altered, are already disrupted. P stands for phosphorus, N stands for nitrogen. And what is the main reason why these elements have been disrupted, their natural cycles? It's because of our addiction to artificial fertilizers in the agricultural sector that really disturb the natural flow of these elements. And as you can see, climate change in yellow, that is the next boundary along with land system change that are expected to be violated if climate action will be delayed and not accelerated. So what are the effects of climate change to human health? And we know the Philippines is really at the heart of the climate crisis. We're always top 5 in the climate risk index of the German Climate Watch. And we know that when climate-related extreme weather events do occur, it's not just the infrastructure, but also food systems, water systems, livelihood, educational systems, and healthcare systems that are being destroyed and disrupted. This is a picture from Tacloban when it was hit by Typhoon Haiyan, and we have seen the enormous human cost of these climate-related natural disasters. And here in the front page of the Inquirer, it says there, it's the worst disaster to hit PH. PH is the nickname of the Philippines, but also PH is people's health and the planet's health. And so, if we don't address climate change right now, we will be seeing more disasters in the years and decades to come. Here, I'm just showing to you what are the different links between climate and health. I will not go into detail, but at the bottom, you will see there are diseases that we already know that will be exacerbated by climate change, mosquito-borne diseases, undernutrition, etc. Meanwhile, there are new emerging anticipated challenges like the mental health effects of climate change, extreme heat, hypertension because people are drinking water high in salt in coastal municipalities where there is already sea level rise. Here you can see dengue, the pattern of dengue globally is changing. It's going to places where they never existed before. Again, strong links between climate change and infectious diseases. Here you will see ocean levels in the Philippines in particular 5 times faster than the global average. So we can just imagine what the people in coastal communities in the Philippines, an archipelagic country, are already witnessing now, the effects on drinking water, the effects on fisheries. But also in the Pacific, you already are hearing islands disappearing because of sea level rise due to climate change. And what will happen when these islands are being inundated? People will need to move. And right now, people are not moving because of the lockdowns. All airplanes have been, parked in airports. But this is the massive migration that we are about to see if climate change will continue. People, the poor, the vulnerable, trying to find a new place, a new location. I remember there are some islands already trying to purchase land in places like Australia in anticipation of the disappearance of their islands. So we've talked about seawater rise, we've talked about infectious diseases, but also non-communicable diseases. Non-communicable diseases are diseases that are not transferred by viruses or bacteria, by microbes. These are, examples include diabetes, cancer, hypertension, and many of these diseases are generated by our defective food systems that, by the way, also emit carbon, that also destroy the soil, that destroy or overuse water resources. And that is why here in this report, it also talks about a global syndemic. Syndemic is when multiple epidemics happen at the same time. Of obesity, because 1 billion people on Earth are over-consuming, while there is also undernutrition, because 1 billion people on Earth are also under-consuming. And then there is climate change, which is emitted by our food systems. So here you will see around 15% of greenhouse gas emissions coming from the meat industry. And I know many of us here are already missing, samgyeopsal and all these sumptuous meat products. But we need to start talking about transitioning our food system from being predominantly meat-based to becoming predominantly plant-based because of the emissions, but also because of the cancers that are generated by increased consumption of red meat and processed meat. This is the news around 3 years ago when WHO declared red meat as a carcinogen, as a cancer-causing food. But also, this is, we're already afraid of COVID-19. It's an infection. But there is another infectious disease phenomenon that we should expect in the years and decades to come, and that is antimicrobial resistance. Let me define what it is. Antimicrobial resistance is when antibiotics are not anymore working because your bacteria, your infectious diseases, your microbes have already become resistant to the antibiotics. And that is scary because your surgeon would rather not operate you because you will die faster of the infection rather than from the tumor. And so that is scary. And as you can see, around 10 million people on Earth will be dying because of AMR in 2050 if not addressed now. And you know what's the main reason why antimicrobial resistance is happening? Around 25% is from human medicine. People are using antibiotics left and right for simple cough. They can buy it from the drugstore, etc. But 75% of antibiotic misuse is coming from the meat industry. We are pumping our pigs and chicken with antibiotics as if they're vitamins. And that is making our antibiotics less effective for human consumption in the years and decades to come. And so there is actually a proposal, a planetary health diet where meat consumption is just a very small portion of the plate. As you can see, that's the red part in that plate. And the bulk is coming from greens and grains and all these healthy but also low carbon food products. So there is an estimate, if you're going to eat a planetary health diet, it will be just 1 serving of meat per week. And that means we will need a worldwide cultural change in order to achieve this planetary health diet that we're talking about. So I'm moving towards the end of my presentation. And right now we are tasked to reimagine health in the post-COVID world with planetary health and the Laudato Si as compasses for a much better and more sustainable and much healthier future. I just want to remind you, this graph, very classic, that healthcare is not produced in the hospital. It's, as you can see, 20% only of health is produced by the doctors, by the nurses, by the medicines. The bulk of health is created outside of it, in the social and environmental factors, in behavioral factors. Do we exercise? What food do we eat? Do we smoke or not, etc.? And so it's very important to have a whole of society approach to health improvement, especially in the post-COVID world. The health systems, as I've said, 20% from healthcare, this is what we should do. We need universal healthcare that is high value, not wasteful, high quality. People are happy because of the healthcare that they're receiving. But also healthcare that is climate smart, because healthcare is not emitting carbon. We cannot be accomplice to the crime of climate pollution. But right now, we also have to add that healthcare systems of the future should be pandemic resistant. When another COVID-19 happens, and unfortunately, I'll tell you, this is not going to be the last pandemic or epidemic that we will be seeing in our lifetime. Our healthcare systems should be ready anytime they show up in our doorstep. I talked about the planetary boundaries a while ago, but here in the the planetary boundaries only talk about the ecological limits, the environmental limits of our actions. But we also need to make sure that we meet people's needs while preserving the planetary boundaries. And that is why I invite you to take a look at this book, Doughnut Economics, the Doughnut Economy, which I think should be required reading for everyone, in addition to the Laudato Si. So everyone should read the Laudato Si and the Doughnut Economics together, because here you can see we need to be in that safe and just space for humanity, that inner circle of the donut that does not exceed the ecological ceiling, the planetary boundaries, but also don't go under the social foundation. We need to make sure people have food and health and social equity and political voice and women empowerment and education. All these will need to be met, but without violating the planetary boundaries. So how can we build donut economies, donut countries, a donut planet, a donut businesses in the post-COVID world? You will see here, there's a study, this is just trivia, that the University of Leeds did a study, and they tried to assess which of the countries in the world is closest to becoming like a donut. And as you can see, it's not the United States. It has met almost all of the social foundations, that's the blue part, but it also exceeded almost every ecological boundary that exists because of the green part. As you can see, the Philippines, we actually have not breached any boundary yet. So that's good news. But we also have lots to address in the social realm, including human health. And that is why strengthening our healthcare system and addressing the social and environmental determinants of health is very important. But you can see on your right, Vietnam. They said in that study, it's the country that is closest to becoming like a donut economy. Only one boundary has been breached, but almost all social foundations have also been reached. And we know Vietnam also has very low COVID-19 cases. So there must something must be happening in that country, and we should study it more. We need to start shifting from a limitless growth model, that is taught to us in conventional economics, and shift towards this idea of a donut economy, a safe and just space for humanity. Pope Francis talked about care for the human home, for a common home. And if you remember, in Greek, home is echo, and echo is both in ecology and economy. This is the time to expand our view of the economy that takes into consideration ecology, the environment. And we cannot treat anymore the environment as an externality, something that is outside of the economy and something that we can pollute and abuse, right? And then we put whatever we did not use back to the ecosystem in the form of waste. We need to change our worldview and our view of our home. And that is what this diagram is showing to you. Last month, I also wrote this article, Reimagining the Political Economy of Planetary Health. And I invite you to take a look into this article. And here I'm saying that I am observing 5 Ds that are slowly unfolding now. Degrowth. Economies are shrinking, right? Because of the economic lockdown. Is it good? Is it bad for both people and planet? That's a question. Decarbonization. We have all these news, as I've said a while ago, of air pollution going down and coal power plants shutting down. Is that good news? And how can we do decarbonization not in the way of a pandemic? That is a question. The globalization. Airplanes are not flying. Trade has been disrupted. Is it good? Is it bad? How can we still become a globalized society that does not create inequalities, but also preserve planetary integrity? The colonization. I think this is a very humbling experience for the West, the North, right? As they see countries in Asia, creating and mounting effective response to the epidemic. And now the United States is the epicenter of the epidemic, unfortunately. So I think there is some narrative there that is unfolding. How can we remove this colonial mentality and colonial barriers that result in health problems, health inequality, but also ecological pollution. And then finally, democratization. People are being forced to stay at home, but people are now, taking matters to their hands. Initiatives, you'll see a lot of people volunteering, creating PPEs, not in factories, but in homes. I think there is promise for more democratization in the world when people are empowered to act on addressing a crisis such as this. There's a lot of discussion about economic recovery. The Philippines is going to pass an economic stimulus to help companies, big and small. How can we use these economic recovery packages to leapfrog towards a much greener, healthier, sustainable economy? We need a global Green New Deal. And I hope that the Laudato Si community can help enrich the conversation. And then finally, COP26, the climate negotiations that is originally slated to happen in November this year in Scotland, has already been postponed as a result of COVID-19. And there is a lot of discussion, how can we make COP26 as the health COP? How to put health at the center of the climate regime, the international climate policy, which in turn will shape national domestic policies and actions on climate change. I remember in the Paris Agreement, there's only one mention of health, and that is in the preamble. You cannot find the word health anywhere in the whole document except for the preamble. This is the time for us to put more health into the climate negotiations, which in turn will inform our actions around the world. And finally, this is my wish, that's why I'm back in the Philippines here to help, create PH Lab, but also really promote planetary health. If you will notice, planetary health in the Philippines share 2 letters, PH. And this is my dream, to make the country the Silicon Valley of planetary health. I would like to add, the Philippines can be the role model of living Laudato Si for the rest of the world. So together, let's work together towards advancing the health of people and planet. Thank you. I'm looking forward to your questions and comments later. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Renzo. So just to recap for the audience, Dr. Renzo talked to us about the importance of being interconnected and the urgency of this. He introduced a lot of terms for us today. He introduced planetary health. It's not that common of a term. Thank you so much for doing that. And he introduced to us how we should become more climate smart and how health systems in the Philippines should become pandemic resistant. He also introduced us to Doughnut Economies, which is a suggested reading for those of you who want to look into that later. So moving on, we will be having a Q&A session after all the speakers. So moving on to our next speaker tonight. Our next speaker tonight is Mr. Naderev or Yab M. Sanyo. He will talk about how the environmental defenders are in action currently. Even while the COVID-19 pandemic has confined us to our homes, biodiversity continues to be endangered, especially here in the country. So Yab Sanyo is the Executive Director of Greenpeace Southeast Asia and member of the Board of Directors of the Global Catholic Climate Movement, or GCCM. He has been working since 1997 on campaigns and programs to combat climate change. He is widely known for his work as Philippines' chief negotiator in the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, or UNFCCC. His impassioned speech in Warsaw in 2013 on the effects of climate change following Typhoon Haiyan, locally known as Typhoon Yolanda, touched the hearts and minds around the world. So, Sir Yab, are you there?
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much, Winken. Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Yes, thank you very much. And a pleasant evening to all of those who are in the same time zone as we are. And maybe good evening, good afternoon, good morning to everyone else who are joining us for this important conversation. And thank you for having me. It's such a pleasure also, and such an humbling to be in this panel with all of our friends in this very august panel. Thank you very much for inviting me, leaving Laudato Si. Now, I have been invited to talk to all of you about a very important issue that has been with us even prior to COVID. It is an issue that has created a very serious ripple within the environmental movement, maybe not just ripples, but large waves of even of fear and anxiety. But it is also something that we are confronting today. But before I go on, I would like first to spend some moments to pay homage to heroes, people who we know have inspired us for many years. And I'm talking about Kaobet Versola, Senator Sonny Alvarez, and many friends who have passed on under our current circumstances. Truly sad to see them go when we are all under lockdowns, when we could not even commemorate their lives in the way that we would have done so if we were able to see each other and greet each other, embrace each other. I also pay homage, and I invite you to pay homage to Jory Porcia, a friend to the environmental movement and environmental activist who had also been involved in COVID-19 relief operations, feeding the poor people in Iloilo, but killed in cold blood on April 30 in his own home in Iloilo City. These are people we want to celebrate as well, aside from, of course, paying homage to them in the sad way they have departed, but also to celebrate their lives and to remind ourselves that without people who stand up to the injustices that inflict damage on our community rights and on the environment, we would be farther away from our dream of a more just and peaceful world. And environmental defenders are truly important with or without the pandemic. And I'll talk to you a little bit more why, especially with the pandemic and perhaps in the scenario that we have to deal with in the coming months and possibly in the coming years, why environmental defenders play an even more important role, more than ever. And the same reasons why environmental defenders are important, relevant, and significant under ordinary times are even more amplified during a pandemic, and the associated measures that are being employed by many governments to contain the pandemic. And it cannot be overemphasized that environmental defenders are more important than ever. These are important questions on why we need to look at the role of environmental defenders with a big picture, but also with the kind of situation that we have now. I'm also very happy that I came after Karen Ibasco, who emphasized for us the big picture quite eloquently, and then after my good friend Renzo, who has shown us a lot of realizations that and lessons that we should have learned through this pandemic, and also the kind of alarm signals that are already there, that we're confronting as a global community. And it is truly important that we ask these questions. Why, what's the relevance now of defending the environment? A lot of us probably think about why we still have to do the work of defending the environment. Now, let me emphasize that the frontliners in defending the environment are not just those who you see talking in panels like this, and many of them are out there in the front lines, in the wilderness, in coastal areas, in fishing communities, in forest communities, also in communities that are being communities that are being driven away from their homes because of all of this ecological devastation happening around them, and also those are being driven away from their home because their land is being taken away from them. So there are also probably questions around, given the origins or the suspected origins of COVID-19, and Renzo has mentioned that earlier, with the continued encroachment of humans into wilderness areas, into natural ecosystems, with also the illegal wildlife trade. How do we address that, and how can we continue to fight such practices, destructive practices? Maybe if you, in your mind, to avoid another pandemic. It's quite simple when we talk about all of these theories around where the virus came from. A lot of evidence points to, of course, the blurred line between the habitats of wildlife and human trade and human activities. So, I mean, it's quite simple, really. If it's illegal, it's illegal. And a lot of illegal wildlife trade is happening around the world. And
it's 20 hours.
And, illegal wildlife trade and trade has a long chain of activities, from poaching and, exploiting communities, and violating so many laws across borders, and ultimately going into a market that is characterized by greed, characterized by entitlement and privilege. And that has no place in a civilized world. And I would like to believe that if we are going to have a better normal after this pandemic, it has no place in a new normal, in a better normal. And illegal or not, the trade in wildlife and endangered species really need to stop. I hope that is a lesson that we have already learned from this pandemic. And how does that relate to the role of people and communities who defend the environment? A lot of communities have been fighting illegal wildlife trade at the grassroots level for many decades now, but it has been a very frustrating, sometimes futile attempt to stop this practice. All of these practices in many parts of the world, every continent has this, and of course, wildlife is just one thing, but when we go back to a discussion on the big picture, the world's most serious environmental issues have reached the point of emergency. And the way we have profoundly, for example, changed the climate system is a very compelling example of why we need to rethink and reimagine a different world that is more mindful, caring, just, and peaceful, both for each other, among us humans, and to nature. Now, when we reflect on how we can continue to protect people and communities under the current circumstances, and maybe with the scenario we imagine, whether that's a new normal or back to the old normal, we must realize we are at war. And I don't like to say we are at war with COVID-19 because that's such a patriarchal way of looking at it. War as a metaphor, by blaming COVID-19 for our troubles and saying we are at war with this virus, I think that is too patriarchal. And I would say we are at war rather with ourselves. And this is a crisis that is seriously challenging our humanity. You see the way we have become disconnected, hopefully temporarily, and hopefully not for much longer. It has challenged our ability to care for others, our ability to express affection and solidarity and unity to each other, our ability to think of others instead of our own interests, our humor, our laughter, our connectedness, our very way of life. And in all of these, those who are at the margins of society, the poor, the neglected, they are bearing the largest share of suffering. So as environmental activists whose mission is to make this world a better place, I hope we all share that mission. It is our duty to continue to do our work, perhaps in a way we have never ever done before. But given the passion we have seen in people who have led us through this journey, including the people I mentioned at the onset, our desire to serve and commitment to change, I believe that we can truly make this happen. And already, many of you understand how the signals are becoming clearer into focus. We see the writing on the wall. And after all, in the environment, when we talk about the environment and caring for creation and heeding the call to address the cry of the poor and the cry of the earth, we also need to be change makers. We need to be activists in the social justice sense. We need to be dreamers, movers, human beings who feel. So yes, we're going to use Zoom and other digital platforms to make it happen for now, but we will make it happen. And that will change the way we defend the environment. That affects in many ways the way we respond. But despite the uncertainties, despite our imperfections as humans, despite our governments and corrupt institutions, despite the greedy corporations, we need to embrace the possibility of something better and welcome that opportunity to be instruments of hope. We don't have to be fearless. It's okay to be scared. The virus could be scary and how it's affecting us. So we don't have to be fearless, but I think we need to be courageous because we cannot be paralyzed. We don't have to be blindly optimistic, but we can be truly, truly hopeful beyond our imagination. And it's all right to be angry, upset, and scared, and that's how many people feel. That's how a lot of people feel, especially those who continue with the work of defending the environment. As we speak, even with the lockdowns, unfortunately, and I absolutely strongly agree with Renzo when he says, let us not romanticize what we see around us with, sometimes I joke about it's the blessing in the skies because the skies are getting clearer. No, this is very temporary. And of course, it's a respite for nature. And I'm sure the mountaintops are recovering. I'm sure the rivers are recovering, even with this little window we have given them. And imagine what more could that be if we gave nature a bit more space, a bit more time. So it's all right to be upset. It's all right to be scared. But perhaps for humanity's sake, we need to gather all of the love we can get around us and be candles in the dark. Now, going back to the issue of environmental defenders, even before COVID and now with COVID-19 and what lies ahead of us. If you're familiar with the report of our friends from Global Witness, they have once again brought to us the deeply alarming, deeply disturbing rise in the killings of environmental defenders around the world. And this particular bit of documentation I absolutely have nothing to be proud about, because last year the Philippines became the #1 most dangerous country to environmental defenders. And add on to that, the Philippines being one of the most dangerous countries to journalists. So unfortunately, this trend will continue. We will continue to see governments and corporations continue to exploit wildlife, land, water, sea, forests, and other natural ecosystems that local communities, in particular our indigenous communities, rely on for their lives and livelihoods. Our brave sisters and brothers who are at the forefront of the resistance in defense of the environment and their community rights are increasingly in the line of fire. And that reminds me of one of my favorite lines, and um, and I borrow the words of Leon Alejandro when he said, "In the line of fire is the place of honor." We know that what that means. That's an exhortation to be brave, and we do know that communities at the front line of the resistance in defense of the environment have that mindset. They are so courageous, and so we might ask, what can we do to support them, especially under a new normal? So beyond the motherhood statements of addressing injustice in society and the general exhortation to address root causes of injustice and hold the perpetrators to account, what else can we do? I'd like to offer a couple of thoughts around what can we do and what many people are already trying to do. One is, we will continue to use the power of the law, and we should continue to use the power of the law, whether, especially under this current situation that we have, where we see a highly militarized approach in many places around the world in dealing with the pandemic. So we will use the power of the law to reject irresponsible development and destructive projects. You know, before they happen, we cannot just use the power of the law if a coal-fired plant is already built, if the forest is already destroyed, if a mega dam is already there. We must oppose those projects before they happen. And this means we force the accountability of governments and those corporations that violate rights. And we must fight as well the criminalization of dissent. Any kind of opposition to those projects are being criminalized, and it's important we are able to use the power of the law. I don't have time to go into examples, but you know, even in countries, and I'm saying hint, with very poor governance and corrupt governments, and including unreliable judiciaries, you know, it's reassuring that laws still retain some power, especially as they relate to the actions of big corporations. So we do have power because when it relates to actions of multinationals or transnational corporations, because they do have a reputation to protect or to worry about, our realization is that laws do have power over them, or at least over the injustice that they commit. The second thing I would encourage all of us to look at is, we follow the money. We can follow the money. And so we look at the international funders, financiers of all of these activities, projects that harm the environment and put defenders at risk. They can be held legally accountable. So that's why a lot of organizations and communities have started to bring to court these companies or these financial institutions. And we also talk about divestment, which is sort of a bigger picture approach to moving away the investments from dirty projects into those that could truly engender a just and green society. So those two things are important if we ask the question of what concrete things can we do. So effectively protecting the environmental defenders require all of these mechanisms to hold the perpetrators accountable in across borders as well, right? So the question you might ask is, will these actions, will these measures solve the crisis of the killings and murder of environmental defenders, or maybe not even as far as those who get killed, even just those who get harassed, those who get bullied online, those who get trolled because they defend communities, because they defend the environment, or because we speak up and stand up against inequality in the world. You know, these are starting points that we need to need to be radically scaled up. But we believe that a lot of things can be done to create a safer environment for many communities who engage in the legitimate protection and defense of community rights. So ultimately, I'd like to emphasize how we protect environmental defenders depend on what that new normal is. If that new normal is a world where pandemics continue to happen, where we live in an aggravated climate crisis and other localized environmental devastation, where a militarized approach becomes dominant, then we need to become true antibodies of solidarity. We need to unite like we have never, ever have before. The environmental movement must set aside all of our ideological differences, all of our cultural differences, and instead we must celebrate those differences and create the strongest environmental revolution in the history of humanity. What is at stake here, my dear friends, is truly our ability to care for each other. That's the most dangerous tipping point we must avoid. If we lose our ability to care for each other, then we would have lost our humanity and we would have lost the battle altogether. Now, if the climate crisis is to be eventually defeated, it will require a massive global economic and moral transformation. And so we must dream of that future where we savor the triumph over climate injustice and all of the ecological crises that we confront in this generation. How do we fight and win this fight? We stand up against every kind of injustice. We stand up against arrogance, which is the belief that they are wiser than nature or wiser than God. We must fight against avarice, which is extreme greed. And we must fight against apathy, which is the belief that it is someone else's job to do something. So we must hold to account those responsible, make them stop the damage they willfully cause, rally the whole world to transcend our differences, to transcend the suffering from our era, and create that new, better future. We also want to remind ourselves, let me say, because I've mentioned about some tactics. With all of these either lawsuits or legal actions and other forms of protest happening all over the world against those who plunder the environment and who kill and threaten environmental defenders, the battle will not be won or lost in courtrooms. They will be won or lost at the grassroots. The battle will not be won or lost in the chambers of law, and most especially not in the chambers of commerce. They will be won or lost in the chambers of people's hearts. That is why it is so tremendously important that with great courage and conviction, we stand together to confront the mighty and powerful who destroy our planet. We stand up for our rights and for what is right. Finally, I wrap up this sharing by quoting Pope Francis himself as we celebrate the 5th anniversary of Laudato Si. And Pope Francis just wrote a couple of weeks ago, in fact, when he made public his new vision post-COVID-19. And he said, I quote, "This is the right time to encourage a new imagination of what is possible with a realism that only the gospel can provide us." He said that he hoped humanity had developed, I quote, "the antibodies of justice, antibodies of charity and solidarity when faced with the temptation to return to the globalization of indifference." And he asks us, and I quote again, Will we be able to act responsibly against the hunger that so many suffer, knowing that there is food for everyone? Will we continue to look the other way with complicit silence in the face of those wars fueled by desires for dominance and power? Will we be willing to change the lifestyles that plunge so many into poverty, promoting and encouraging ourselves to lead a more austere and humane life that enables an equitable distribution of resources? Will we, as the international community, take the necessary steps to stem the devastation of the environment, or will we continue to deny the evidence? It's time for us to create a civilization of hope. And each individual action, as Pope Francis says, is not an isolated action, for better, for worse. It has consequences for others because everything is connected in our common home. And I look forward to our discussions later. Thank you very much again for having me. Mabuhay po kayong lahat.
Thank you so much, Sir Yab Sanyo. Thank you so much for bringing to light, to our attention, the struggles of what it means to be an environmental defender, and not just being one of those environmental defenders at the frontliners, but also the struggle to really wake up and find courage and new passion. Like as you said, it's a really difficult time for all of us. And right now we struggle even to take care of ourselves, but we have to gather together within ourselves the courage to wake up, to move forward, and to remember to exercise our ability to care for each other and find solidarity. So moving forward, now COVID-19 is a difficult time for all of us. Even though some of us are blessed to be in a region that has shifted from ECQ to GCQ, we cannot deny the mental toll of the uncertainty that the pandemic has caused us. Now, to talk about spirituality and meaning making in the face of trauma, grief, and death, here's Dr. Rogelio Bayod. He's the president of the Philippine Association for Campus Student Advisors, or PACSA. He is a professional. He is also he holds a degree of Doctor of Philosophy in Development Administration from the University of Southeastern Philippines. He is currently pursuing a Doctor of Philosophy in Bioethics, Sustainability, and Global Health in American University of Sovereign Nations, or AUSN. So please welcome Dr. Rogelio Bayod.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening, Sir Rodney. I'm happy that you are inviting me to share my simple reflection about the importance of spirituality. But before I proceed with my thoughts and reflections, I would like to thank you for this opportunity and for also inviting PACSA to be part of your advocacy in terms of caring for the ailing environment. Now, my talk will center on the importance of spirituality and meaning making in the face of trauma, grief, and death. But before I will talk on the spirituality, I will first discuss in terms of the components of this talk, the nature and end of civilization, the crisis and demise of capitalism, and the nature of truth, and the emergence of post-humanism, all under the purview of COVID-19 pandemic. This pandemic also reveals that civilization, however powerful, comes to an end. The pandemic will change the world as states and governments realize the limits of capitalism. This pandemic proves that the world can no longer be defined in terms of the foundation or source. And so what we need is spirituality that is inclusive and takes into account the reality of our being limited and imperfect, and therefore we are not in control here, and so to also find meaning in all our experiences. In the allegory of the cave, Plato described the world of the senses as a dark prison cell in which people confuse reality from the mere representation of reality. Nature for Plato is nothing but a poor copy or reproduction of the ideal world. This ideal world belongs to the intellect, while the world of the senses is nothing but an illusion. In contrast, an idea Plato explains is universal, unchangeable, and eternal. This means that the truth points to those principles that have lasting significance. For Plato, values do manifest what perfection means as compared to the things of the senses that are simply temporary. Knowledge in this regard is the rising above or liberation of every man from the darkness that envelops the cave. But during modern time, modernity locates the meaning of this truth in an ego. The Cartesian methodic doubt makes the ego the source or foundation of all knowledge. Knowledge gave birth to science, and with science, the Industrial Revolution. And with modernity, what we have is the world as we know it today. A lot of consumption, influenced by consumerism and capitalist mindset. But behind the growth and progress of nation is the reality of power. This power is most manifest in the realm of politics. Politics, as you know it, is about control. The sovereign, as a ruler, is the law into the land. Aristotle may have defined the good life in terms of the practice of virtuous life within the state, but the reality is that power is about expansion and the subjugation of others. As such, the history of the world is the story of glory and gore, of the birth and death of civilizations. And I will try to examine in this talk the consequence of the pandemic to capitalism as the source of modern day culture, in which the human is defined by the fantasy or hallucination of the consumer culture. For Herbert Arthur Hodges, civilization involves the complexities of social, cultural structures, including its symbols and beliefs, and is often characterized by the ability of human individuals to dominate and separate themselves from the natural environment. The organization of society depends on the ability of human beings to define for themselves a worldview that is based on self-reflection and consciousness. We can speak of Eastern civilization in terms of religion, while modern Western civilization may be characterized as grounded on reason and secularism. While Hodges focuses on the way societies are created, including the discoveries of many things that would help man build his world by using revolutionary methods such as in science, it is power that determines how the state is ruled and administered. So power may be the missing part in the Hodges analysis in terms of civilization. The same power also secures the political realm and fuels the desire of any ruler who in most instances considers himself a demigod, to expand his territory by subjugating other peoples and by taking their land away from them. The medieval period, when parading itself as the glorious years of religion, offers no real respite from the brokenness that comes to the existence of man. Known as the Dark Ages for putting man at the course of self-destruction by making him believe blindly in a God of the religion, the value or meaning of human dignity came to be defined on the basis of this God. This transcendent being is thought out as the master of one's fate. God is law. The value of humanity is not something that comes from the worth of persons. Rather, it is something that must be defined by religion and conferred upon man. But the fact of the matter is that the earliest conquerors of the Far East who came from Europe use the same religion and cross in order to subjugate the local people and take away from them their lands. So domination came in the form of lie through faith, which actually is about how an indigenous tribe may be held in bondage by obeying their new masters. However, religion as well as economics come into play in terms of the molding of the modern man. Max Weber explains how Europeans, through the Protestant work ethic, have since overcome the Dark Ages to emerge as a mighty civilization who value the importance and true meaning of life here on earth. The Reformation in Europe challenged not only the power of the church, but the will of God itself. Worldly success was seen as a symbol of salvation. This meant that capitalism relied on the thesis that faith must be defined in human terms. Traditional church authority was simply viewed as dogma. This Protestant ethic implied that Europeans understood how to put God's given talent into productive use. The development of Europe needed a systematization of the ways of living or lifestyle that befits the capitalist motto of human achievement. But the progress of the European civilization now comes into serious question, especially with the coming of this pandemic. 1 billion people in the world today live below the poverty line, according to the World Bank. 30,000 children die each day from preventable disease due to poverty. The victims are concentrated in the most depressed parts of the world, notably in sub-Saharan Africa. Now, it may be recalled that the continent also serves as a grim reminder of the evils of colonialism. The success of Europe's state may not be fully attributable to Protestant work ethic, but also to a policy of domination which has exploited and taken advantage of a powerless group of indigenous peoples in the Far East. Until today, many of the states in Africa are divided, torn apart by war and constant political turmoil. Indeed, slavery is the perpetual reminder of the evils done on the helpless natives by those who thought of themselves as superior than their fellow Homo sapiens. A second assault on the identities of people came during the modern period, which to this day has come to define the civilized man. Modernity grounds everything on reason. Reason in this regard is the source of all knowledge. With modernity came the advent of science, and with it also the Industrial Revolution. The industrial shift in the modern civilized world gave rise to the idea of capital. And with capital comes the notion of production and surplus value. Soon, the surplus value translates into labor. Man as a worker, Karl Marx says, is an alienated being from his own humanity. Man is now reduced into a cheap commodity, and with this, his dignity as a human being. The same sort of influence comes to determine the world in which we live today. Man must produce something in order to give meaning to his life. In the process of production, Marx explains, it's itself the alienation of labor. But the problem we have now, of course, is that the world participates in the whole scheme through an educational paradigm that is anchored on the idea of human productivity and achievement, and fueled by the global economic order. Because of this, there is an ongoing war against our Mother Earth. You can see this in a lot of indigenous communities, as in my own field work in different indigenous communities in Mindanao. This war is very evident. And this war has its roots in an economy which fails to respect ecological and ethical limits, such as limits to inequality, limits to injustice, limits to greed and economic concentration. In the name of what they called as development, Politicians, businessmen, technocrats, and scientists, and other capitalists continue to display its arrogance in using their brains and acquired technologies to exploit and destroy forest lands, mountains, oceans, rivers, and even atmospheres. The main agent of this war is the global corporate economy and global capitalism that advocate insatiable accumulation of profit and ravenous consumption of the earth's resources. And so this global corporate economy engages permanent war against the planet. The end point of this war is a form of mass destruction by destroying the environment and depriving the people of the very source of their lives, such as their lands, with their food and water and with their medicine, through poisonous substance and other toxic chemicals, thus killing the web of life. According to Inger Andersen, the executive director of the United Nations Environment Program, nature is sending us a message. It is claimed that there is evidence that harming or altering the environment in certain ways raises the probability of virus crossing species. The conservationist Jane Goodall, for example, is reported as saying that the loss of animal habitat is part of a problem, making it easier for viruses to spread from one animal to another and then to humans. Many other scientists and environmentalists support the view that deforestation and reduction in biodiversity, amongst other factors, increase the likelihood of viruses cruising from one species to another, including to humans. This can lead to spillover of viruses to other species, including to humans. Animals with higher stress levels are more susceptible to viruses, something that these habitat changes make more likely. Given the evidence of effects of human activity on the environment, it is worth taking seriously Andersen's claim that nature is sending us a message, a claim that presumably would sound like common sense to many indigenous peoples, especially here in the Philippines and in Mindanao, as far as my experience would tell me. Now, can COVID-19 be nature's strong message? COVID-19 have put the world in a virtual standstill. Governments impose travel bans, border restrictions, and curfews. It put million people around the world out of work. Affluent societies injected hundreds of billions of dollars into their economy to be able to fight the virus. The coronavirus has enormous political implications. It meant that a pandemic goes beyond any border and threatens regional and global stability. The disease proves that no government is powerful enough to contain an epidemic of this magnitude, with wealthy states racing against time to produce a vaccine or treatment. The virus revealed what nations are mostly unprepared for, that is, biological warfare. Curfews imposed in poor countries result to the disruption in the lives of people, with some states resorting to harsh measures in order to control the population. In fact, some states is very repressive to the point that they're being coronavirus is a kind of justification of their repressive policies. In the end, it has become a battle of life and death. Governments now realize that something in this world cannot be resolved by conflict. Looking at these things, this way can affect the way this coronavirus can affect the way that we see technology and its role. We might and should start to think more about how our technologies affect the earth. In indigenous thought, all of nature deserves respect. It is not only people who are worthy of respect, but given the oneness of humans and the rest of nature, everything in nature must be respected. My principle is life is a song. It's a relationship with self, with others, with nature, and with God. If one of this relationship is not in balance, there is imbalance, and there is imbalance. There's harmony. It results to sickness. It's not well-being. Viewed in this way, COVID-19 can be seen as an apocalypse in its original Greek meaning, not as a catastrophe, but rather as an unveiling or revelation. It is helping us to realize that we are part of nature, and if we ignore its interest, it will lead to our peril. Now, on my thesis that can this be a death to capitalism? So in this talk, I would like to focus in terms of our reflection, what happens next to capitalism and its values after this crisis. The word crisis takes its origin from the Greek krisis, which means decision. There are what we call individual and as well as collective decisions. Collective decisions often come from agreement or dialogue that is coming from conversations. On the other hand, some decisions reflect the personality of leaders and sometimes the abuse of one's position, as in a dictatorship. For obvious reasons, dictators often make one-sided decisions that are often inimical to the interests of the people. But this death of capitalism means that in the end, the world cannot rely on profits. When an emergency such as COVID-19 comes into the fore, liberal states are now beginning to understand that capitalism lacks enough safety mechanism that will protect the well-being of people. That stimulating the economy is not enough, most especially when something unseen as powerful as this virus will dictate the way things must be done and can put all to a halt, including industries and the way of life of people. Money indeed is not everything. When people stop things that they do, the value of money also falls down. The financial markets indeed is nearing the state of meltdown. The free market ideology appears threatened by enormous economic impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. It marks a kind of dangerous moment in which the only rescue available comes from huge bailouts by governments. The situation, of course, cannot be sustained in the long run. Thus, it seems that dominant business and industries are in comatose, noticeably the tourism sector. People cannot travel. Indeed, all of this reveal that even in a virus such as COVID-19, this virus can reshape the way the world does things. The demise of capitalism is not necessarily the end of the world, but the greater concern of humanity is the retrieval of human or fundamental human values with which society may be able to use in order to anchor itself as it tries to traverse a world which is no longer defined by capitalist or materialist utopia. This pandemic also reveals something else. It defies abstraction. As government grapple with the hard facts in terms of the number of infections, they also realize that what is happening is something that is beyond politics. Draconian measures such as strict curfews cannot be easily enforced in liberal societies because such would demean the idea of freedom. A lot of people here are complaining about all these restrictions. But it seems that even the meaning of freedom is thrust against the desire to survive. When people in my interviews with a lot of people as a responder to this pandemic. In my own capacity with some of my colleagues, I went to communities to give some relief. Some of them would rather go out and risk the virus rather than having no food to eat because of no work. So they have to find means to really have the food in their table. So the question now is, where do we go from here? It is here that I'm offering my simple reflection on the need of spirituality and meaning making to be able to deal with different troubling scenarios brought about by COVID-19 pandemic. What is spirituality? For me, spirituality is like health. We all have health. We may have good health. We may have poor health. But it's something that we cannot avoid having. The same is true with spirituality. Every human being is a spiritual being. Therefore, we have spirituality even if we do not have religion. Spirituality involves learning how to live with imperfection. As counseled by John Colobos, one of the Desert Fathers, if you see someone going up to heaven by his own will, grab his legs and pull him down again. The search for spirituality brings down to earth, to the ground, plant our feet firmly on the ground, and allows a vision of a self as it is. We are imperfect, we are ambiguous beings. The insight that I would like to point out here is that our pain, our darkness, our suffering, our fears, and our doubts is actually a thirst for something beyond this material universe. It's something is beyond us. It's a transcendent being. It's God. We seek help for what we cannot face or accomplish alone. In seeking help, we accept and admit our own powerlessness. And in that acceptance and admission, in that acknowledgement that we are not in control, no matter how brilliant we are, spirituality is born. The spirituality of imperfections assures us that God comes to our wounds and our very own imperfections. What religion labels as sins, what psychology or psychotherapy calls a sickness or addiction, what philosophy terms as errors or judgment or loopholes in cognition, are what precisely brings us closer to the reality that no matter how hard we try to deny it, if we are not the ones in control here. And this realization inevitably and joyously brings us closer to God. Spirituality points always beyond the ordinary, yet it can be discovered in the extraordinariness of an ordinary event, beyond the narrow confines of the self, beyond possessions and expectation. This is beautifully expressed in the story. The philosopher Diogenes was sitting on a carved stone, eating bread and herbs for his supper. He was seen by the philosopher Aristippus, who lived comfortably by flattering the king. Aristippus said to Diogenes, "If you just learn to be subservient to the king, you would not have to live on herbs." Diogenes replied, "Learn to live on herbs, and you will not have to cultivate the king." How many of us trade off our freedom and dignity for greater economic benefits, even if in the process we have to be docile, we have to be subservient to the whims and fancies of those powerful people, and even trade off our freedom to control our environment in exchange of economic benefit, corporations coming in to ravage the environment. how to deal with our moments of loss during this COVID-19 pandemic. In one of our discussions with my students in theology course, we were dealing with the different inadequate images of God that many people embrace in their lives. One of the inadequate images of God that stirred a debate among my students is the image that God is a tester. Well, a lot of theologians would assert that God is a tester image is inadequate and would even provide good theological arguments against it. There are still people who cling to this image because this image has helped them in dealing with many adversities in life. In fact, one of my students shared her difficult struggles with her family and how she keeps her sanity by believing that she was like the mother Job, who was tested by God during his time, but still chose to trust in him, and in the end, all his blessing and fortunes were restored by God. One student also shared that by believing that God is just testing him through the many difficulties that they have encountered in life, made him endure the pains and the trials, thinking that at the end of the test, those who perform better will have the reward from God. For Joyce Rapp, I was talking earlier about existential ache and pain. For Joyce Rapp, this existential pain is within us because we are composed of both physical and spiritual dimensions. Since we are not only composed of body but also spirit, our final home is not here on earth but somewhere beyond this physical reality. Thus, no matter how good and comfortable, if there is goodness now and comfort in this earth, maybe for us, maybe for some, there is always part of us that is yearning and longing for the true homeland where life is no longer difficult or unfair. The spirituality that I would like to point out is the spirituality of imperfection, and this spirituality of imperfection is best captured in the picture of a journey, a pilgrimage, that we are just pilgrims here on earth. And the goal of our pilgrimage is simply to keep moving spiritually, little by little, every day. In seeing life as a pilgrimage, the vision that is spirituality's open-endedness recognizes that it is not how far one has come that is significant, but how far one has yet to go. Thus, despite different aches because of loss that we have, because of a tragic event that we have encountered, especially during this pandemic, we are challenged to go on, even if in the going or the journey may get rough and rough along the way. In one of article of Friedrich Buchner in the book Walking with God in a Fragile World, is saying that we are confronted again and again with the truth that our world and our life is fragile. And there is no doubt that the world is fragile and the return of chaos is a perpetual possibility. The idea that another virus may come in. So life is still uncertain. Even if lockdown and enhanced community quarantine will be lifted, which is already happening now in this country, in the Philippines, we cannot go back to what we have been used to before this pandemic. In fact, for those who have lost their family members, loved ones, and friends because of the novel coronavirus, their lives will never be as normal as before. So what shall we do now, given this scenario? It is here that I am offering my simple reflection. I think it is important that we will now fix our gaze on our God who cares, who suffer, but also deeply cares for all of us. This is not saying that we will not do our part. Of course, we will need to look for solutions, vaccines and others, medicine for this pandemic. We still need to work so hard to restore our economy. And maybe, hopefully, people will realize that economy and ecology are interrelated. We cannot have economy without ecology. And we will continue to enhance our knowledge in science and technology, development theories and economics. But let us not forget to also focus our attention to the God who cares. According to Joyce Rapp, God's love is such a powerful companion for us that no matter how searing or how intense the hurt of our losses, He will help us to recover our hope, our courage, and our direction in life. Believing in this beautiful promise of God, we will be discerning to the will of God in our lives during and after this pandemic. As a caring God, He promised to be with us and to comfort us, to sustain us, and to keep us from being shattered by our trauma, fear, guilt, sufferings, and difficulties brought about by this pandemic. God's compassion and care is shown in His being a good shepherd to His flock. But of course, aside from understanding and believing that God is always with us in our moments of pains and sufferings, it is also important to get in touch with our own philosophies of life. Joyce Rapp calls this as our one-liners, such as nothing is permanent, including pains and sufferings. This too shall pass. God is above all this. God will provide. If it's not yet your time, it won't come to us. Life is beautiful. We are blessed and we can be a blessing. There is beauty in the mess. Maybe for Filipinos, we call that laban lang, adya. These are all a kind of force that help us to face this tragic event. For Viktor Frankl, in his search for meaning, people's constant search for life's meaning and purpose, especially in moments of pains and sufferings, are part of his freedom, inner freedom. Frankl would say, we are free. Basically, some sort of philosophy of Sartre. We are absolutely free. We might be imprisoned physically, but we are free spiritually and maybe some internally. Viktor Frankl's persistent search for meaning helped him to survive the difficult moments that he experienced in life, being a prisoner in a concentration camp during World War II. Instead of succumbing to pain and depression, he searched for life's meaning and purpose through his suffering. Because I'm a Christian, I'm Catholic. While I sort of embrace a kind of pluralistic conception of religion this time, and I'm more inclined into indigenous religion, indigenous spirituality. But it's very important to also learn from Jesus himself. Jesus invites those who suffer to think of their suffering as a source of spiritual growth and blessing. In his teachings, Jesus says, I'll tell you solemnly, unless a grain of wheat falls into the ground and dies, it will remain a grain of wheat. But if it dies, it will bear much fruit. Indeed, there is value in suffering, pain, and grief. They remind us of our incompleteness, but they can also lead us to discover our vast reservoirs of resiliency, vitality, and endurance. Suffering and pain and grief may refine not only our body, but also our spirit. To conclude my simple reflection, it is important that in this difficult moment of our lives, our choices are so significant, they matter a lot. In fact, they will shape our lives not only in the present, but also in the future. As a free being, we have a choice either to wallow in pain, grief, and depression, or we can choose to go on living and loving despite hardships, loss, and uncertainties in the future. We will probably experience many losses: life, properties, jobs, health, especially nowadays, security, job security among the private employees is threatened. But if we still have purpose and meaning in our lives, we will continue to face the many forms of deaths that this pandemic has brought and might still bring into our lives. Our culture, our spirituality, philosophy, and belief system have many things to offer to us to help us face and embrace different kinds of deaths. What this means is that the near utopian ideal of a post-humanist world is a kingdom that is not controlled by one religion, nation, or dogmatic principle. In such a world, people care and value each other on the basis of our humanity, a humanity that is not to be defined by norms or rules that are abstracted from our institutions, but from our constant attempt to discover the we through our conversations. That's what we have done. The Living Laudato Si in the Philippines are engaging in all these crucial conversations, interactions, and sharing of feelings. Earliest Marlon Young would tell this about storytelling, the importance of sharing our narratives. I hope this will continue, and I hope that Living Laudato Si will continue to be a force to reckon with, especially as regards to caring an environment and inviting each one to be partake in the ethics of care, especially for our Mother Earth. With this, I would like to thank you and God bless everyone.
Thank you so much, Dr. Bayod, for that enlightening conversation. If it's possible, we hope that we could see your presentation, perhaps through email.
I can email you my presentation and even
Thank you.
the paper if you wish.
Thank you. All right, so that wraps up all our speakers. I am very, very honored to be in the same webinar as all these speakers here tonight. And now moving forward, we're going to go to the Q&A. So for the panelists, here's a question from Shane Ann Lim. So she asks, if practices of some cultural traditions are one of the major causes of ecological degradation and public health deterioration, how can governments or intergovernmental organizations deal with these problems without compromising the rights of people to practice their cultural traditions? So, Sir Yab, Dr. Renzo, would you like to answer the question?
Mm-hmm. Sige, I can start. Thanks for that question. And I think these are very important questions to ask. We always frame these discussions as if it's a matter of, it's an either or question, that, we need to, if we need cleaner environments and improve health, then we need to totally, let's say, destroy our economic systems, our way of life, our culture. And for sure, COVID-19 is showing us that there are things that we might still want to retain. I think I just answered a while ago to another question very related to this one. But also, we are now being shown the many things that we need to change, right? For example, even in work practices, it was unimaginable that actually a lot of the jobs can, now we're realizing they can be done at home, right? Given universal access to internet. So, maybe what we should be asking for example, is make internet access a universal right, but also ensure there are protections and safeguards. So, we benefit from the gifts of digital technology and not being harmed by it. As we also know, it's a double-edged sword. And then when it comes to, like, I think the question was also referring to, because culture is broad, it's not just indigenous ethnic cultures, among specific people, but culture at large, our way of life as a country and as a community. But specifically when it comes to indigenous groups, for example, and it might touch on the issue of wildlife consumption as well, which was asked a while ago. I think it's important that in analyzing and identifying entry points for cultural and systems level change, that their voices are heard, that they are represented around the table. I think that's the first step. I think many of the decisions that we've made, not just for this COVID-19, but for millennia, it's about those who are in power making decisions for the rest, and with that need to change. And consultation, having their voices represented, is definitely important if we want to achieve ecological and public health integrity vis-a-vis culture, respect for culture and people's way of life. Thanks.
All right, thank you, Dr. Moving on to the next question. All right.
I think Yeb would like to.
Okay, so Yeb, the same question. So, if it is a question of crossing lines with cultural traditions, how can government or intergovernment organizations deal with these problems without compromising the rights of people to practice their cultural traditions?
I hope I can be brief, but I wanted to relate to that question and unpack that question. I think the question relates to cultural practices, or let's say traditions, as in, for example, the suspected origins of the virus that has caused COVID-19, so SARS-CoV-2, which is a zoonotic disease. And so the suspicion, or there is evidence that show that because of consumption of wildlife, which is being portrayed as part of the cultural tradition, right? I would think that creates a lot of damage, especially there is a domino effect as we now see with this pandemic. But many of these cultural traditions have changed over many years, and I'd like to relate that with what Pope Francis also said around culture. In Laudato Si, he talks about integral ecology, and he is saying that humanity faces not just a number of crises isolated from one another. So this is not just problems emanating from, for example, on consumption of wildlife, but a lot of other problems are intertwined, including the economic system, the political system, and therefore it is a complex crisis rather than just simple isolated different crisis. It's a complex crisis that manifests itself in not so many different ways. The indifference and harm being done to the environment is not only about the land or water and air being polluted, but it also includes dangerous attitudes towards each other, as well as economic practices that hurt people. And for one such complex crisis to stem from a defective anthropology, which is about culture that does not recognize and respect the full dignity of others who are part of one human family. So that's tragic, because the complex crisis stems from a defective anthropology, which is about culture. So the solution, Pope Francis says, is an integral ecology that challenges all of us to broaden our focus of concern and our daily behavior to include sustainable environmental ecology, protection of human life, concrete acts of solidarity with the poor, ethical conduct in economic affairs. These are the solutions that the Holy Father is promoting. And I think in answering this question, it is important that we recognize that the culture of waste is a culture that is more destructive rather than some of these, traditional cultural practices. So in many ways, we need to address the bigger culture of waste that has destroyed the environment. Thank you.
Hello, thank you. Thank you so much, Suryab. All right, and the next question. So, how do you think, what opportunities do you think are present now during the COVID-19 situation that can be opportunities for change, for a new normal, new better normal? So, Miss Karen Ibasco, would you like to answer that? I'll repeat the question po.
Okay.
So there was a question, how could the COVID-19 phenomenon be an opportunity for change?
Okay. Well, good evening, good morning, and good afternoon to everyone. Well, personally, just listening to all the talks, I was very much uplifted and informed as well. It was very comprehensive, it's very informative. But one thing that I can say is that everyone's just staying at home. People can really see that something is happening out there. And everything is connected to each other environmentally. So one thing that we can say, I don't want to say it's a new normal because I know everything, this too shall pass. And one day we're going to go out again, although it's going to be a bit different for us. But one thing that I can say is that when we go out there, it's important for us to always give importance to the environment. As we are staying in our homes, we can see that there is really something happening out there. That's why I'm very grateful to actually listen to all the speakers who are very much credible in their fields and learning from them and continually using what I have to make other people understand that we really need to have, or we really need to give a chance and give our voices to make a difference in the environment, because it's really backfiring at us no matter what we're doing. Either it's about the plastics, or it's about the consumption or the use of fossil fuels. It's really backfiring in human beings. And the reasons why we want to protect the environment is also for the benefit of humanity, not just for this one, but also for the next generation. And I believe that our other speakers can also answer that with more credibility than I do. And I would love to listen to other answers as well.
Yeah, Lincoln. Yeah.
Yeah.
Can I add? And I think, maybe we've scared our audience for the past 2 hours talking about the world's problems. But I think we need to inspire them more in terms of, the idea that that the future is in their own hands, that there are things that they can do, big or small. Listening to Karen, for example, and I want to call Miss Karen now, not just Miss Earth, but Miss Planetary Health. I think everyone, each and every one of us, we're around 300 people here. We have a responsibility to spread the word of Pope Francis, Laudato Si, of Planetary Health, and use this moment really to educate our own families. So, and even in social media, all of you will be posting something before you sleep tonight. And I hope that post will be something about the message of Pope Francis for the future of planetary health in the post-COVID world. So being messengers, also starting at home, all these small changes. If we dream big and we want system level change, the change will need to start at both levels, some at the systematic level, at the structural level, but also at the individual, at the personal, at the family level. And then finally, I think, I answered a while ago in the chat box that COVID-19 is what we call a critical juncture, where previously unthinkable reforms are already now put on the table. We've never thought that, work from home will be the norm, right? We've never thought of, what else are unfolding right in front of our very eyes. And then now these questions are being asked. So let's use this moment. Unfortunately, as Karen also mentioned, it's not going to end tomorrow. The vaccine is still coming until 2021. That's the target date. And it will be expensive and it will go to the highest bidder. So I'm not even very optimistic about vaccine access for the rest of the world. That's why we really need to start, thinking of a different future post-COVID. Let's use this moment wisely. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Dr. Renzo. One more question for Miss Karen. What do you think in the time of COVID is the strength of women in this time of environmental degradation and the pandemic?
The strength of women. Well, I'm not just gonna categorize it for women. I'm going to speak for all people. This is not a time to categorize just for women, but I believe that every voice really matters. Just as what Doc said earlier, every one of us, and we really have to start within ourselves. You don't have to depend on other people. And when you're helping other people, you don't have to think that you're doing it in isolation, because a lot of people are on the same boat with you. Although maybe you're not seeing them, but you just really have to continue in this path, because a lot of people are doing it as well. What Doc said earlier is that maybe before you sleep tonight, you don't need to have a lot of followers to do it, because if you just speak a message, it can go viral. It can have a different connection to other people. And you know that your voice will be heard. And a lot of people are also doing the same thing. So maybe you can start at home. Start with your families. Start doing simple things at home that are feasible for you to do. You don't have to make a big contribution as of now, but you have to remember that when everything, or all of your efforts come together, it will make a great impact. That's why it's important to have this kind of webinars to make people understand what we must do, and we must be informed what is happening for us to know what to do.
Thank you so much.
Winken, if I may just comment on that question just very quickly. I've always believed the Miss Universe answer to what is one single thing you can recommend so that we solve the planetary crisis. For me, the answer is empower women. But I also agree with Karen about all of our voices being united. But I also want to emphasize that in this pandemic, those countries that have responded well are led by women heads of state. So maybe Karen should run for president at some point.
Okay, I heard that, sir.
Right. Karen, I can be your Secretary of Health. And Yeb will be your Secretary of Environment.
We are gonna answer one more question, sir. Do we still have time? All right. Yes. Okay. So, which one do I ask? Some of your questions have been answered, please don't forget to check the answered tab. Okay. How can we deal? A question from John Ruiz. How could we deal most states' attack on environmental defenders as anti-development, therefore anti-government, even labeled as terrorist communist? Mining reclamations and corporate plantations are being peddled out as investments, job opportunities, and now a source of needed government finance to fund for health and recover economy after COVID-19 crisis. So, Sir Yab, would you like to answer that question?
Unfortunately, I don't think we have 2 hours to discuss that very complex topic. But yeah, it's an issue that we always encounter. Those who defend the environment, who oppose projects, are always labeled or red tagged and labeled as anti-development. I hope all of us in this webinar agree that those who stand up for what is right and defend the environment and fight against greed, against apathy, and against arrogance are not anti-development. And development is relative. The kind of development we've seen for many decades is a development that has not benefited people and planet, and therefore we must redefine what we mean by development. And for those who stand up to defend the environment and those who get killed in the process are those who believe that development should redound to the benefit of people rather than corporations and corrupt government. So I hope that everyone who have joined us today embrace that idea as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sir Yab. If any one of you wants to follow the work, you can, the work of any of our speakers, you may follow them on their websites, their organizations, and their social media platforms. And now, last question from Huawei MediaPad M5 Lite. Okay. How do you relate? Oh, this is a question for Dr. Bayod. How do you relate the idea that we are in the same ocean but in different boats to human suffering during these COVID times? Dr. Bayod, are you there? Hello, paging Dr. Bayod. I'm not so sure if the internet is delayed there. All right, maybe we'll give him, Doc, maybe like 10 more seconds. Okay, for anyone who wants to answer po. How do you relate the idea that we are in the same ocean but in different boats to human suffering during these COVID times? Dr. Renzo or Sir Yab or Ms. Karen, would you like to answer? So it's, how do you relate the idea that we are in the same ocean but different boats to human suffering during COVID times?
Yan ang Miss Universe question. Maybe that's for Karen.
I'm not Miss Universe, I'm Miss Earth. But one thing that I can say with that, it's a very comprehensive question. And a lot of us haven't eaten yet, but I guess everyone is experiencing the same thing. A lot of people have different perspectives in this pandemic. But you need to understand you don't have to push what you believe in to other people. What you have to do is to show them. Even if you are on the same boat, you can still help them. You can still extend a helping hand. So you don't have to push what you believe in. You just have to show them. You just have to show them love in this time of need. Volunteerism. A lot of people are actually doing a good thing. And there's so many things that this pandemic is also doing good for individual people. A lot of people don't volunteer a lot. And this time, a lot of people are sacrificing for the benefit of a lot of people. So I think even though we are on different boats, we have different perspectives in life, you don't have to push what you believe in. You just have to show what you believe in. And it's going to be more powerful than just saying it.
Thank you so much, Ms. Karen. I'm sorry to put you all guys in a Miss Earth international Miss Earth setting. And thank you so much for your time and your sharing of your expertise and your sharing of your passion. And now let's move on to, let's move on to a short presentation about living Laudato Si. So how you can also join, how you can coordinate with us. And Sir Rodney?
Thank you, Winken, and a short video for everyone.
Kasama si Pope Francis at ng buong mundo, pagkilusan natin ang mga panawagan ng encyclical letter na Laudato Si on care for our common home sa ika-5 anibersaryo nito. Sa linggo ng Laudato Si mula ika-16 hanggang ika-24 ng Mayo, magsama-sama tayo para sa ating common hope sa pagkilos sabay-sabay dahil ang lahat ay magkakaugnay.
And as we celebrate the 5th anniversary of Laudato Si on Care for a Common Home, Pope Francis is inviting us to join and spark a conversation, many dialogues to talk about how to care for our planet, how to care for planetary health, of course. And we are inviting all of you to join us within this week. The message would be, we need to hear the cry of the earth and the cry of the poor. And all over the world, not only for Catholics, but for different faith communities, we recognize the importance of looking at ourselves and looking at some insights and principles na nakasulat dyan sa Laudato Si na encyclical ni Pope Francis. From today until May 24, we have some webinars which may be of interest to everyone. Of course, at this very moment, we have Planetary Health is Human Health. On May 18, we will have Integral Ecological Conversion, Post-COVID-19 Economic Recovery. We will be joined by Professor Toby Monsod from UP School of Economics, and also the incoming President of Ateneo de Manila University, Father Bobby Yap, and the most revered Father Pedro Walpole of ESSC. On May 21st, for those who are asking about schools, campuses, how do we leave Laudato Si in schools, we'll be actually having our webinar on Laudato Si Schools Towards Ecological Citizenship. We'll be joined by Ateneo de Davao, University of San Jose Recoletos, Miriam College, LaSalle Schools, and also University of Santo Tomas. And we'll be presenting as well the draft framework for Laudato Si Schools as we work closely with the Vatican. And on the 24th, we'll be launching our new website. We'll be launching also online the Sustainable Development Goals and Laudato Si Handbook. And through this webinar, Sustainable Development Goals and Laudato Si Towards Eco-Solidarity. And just to give you some pointers on what we do for Living Laudato Si Philippines, we are focused on divestment and investment. And we keep track of Catholic institutions, Catholic investments in financial institutions and companies. And we work together with the church to call on local financial institutions to divest from industries that harm the environment and invest in sustainability. We have also a program on education and awareness. We bring throughout the Philippines the documentary of Cheche Lazaro on coal-fired power plants. It's a 30-minute investigative documentary on the effects of coal-fired power plants in the country. And after that, we do town hall meetings with a panel of representatives from different sectors of society. Laudato Si Schools also. So we have 7 Laudato Si Schools eco-actions towards integral ecological education for a common home. So as I have said, we have developed this framework based on Laudato Si to be integrated in the strategic plan of Catholic schools. Not only curriculum, not only research, but throughout the strategic plan and direction of the school. And also we have this campaign, hashtag Laudato Si 211 or LS211. You can actually go to your schools, and it's so hard for all of us to actually read Laudato Si in its totality. Laudato Si number 211 enumerates 9 ecological actions suggested by Pope Francis. And we have Facebook page, Laudato Si PH, and we have an online community there. Our Twitter is Laudato Si PH, and our Instagram is Laudato Si PH as well. Please email us info@livinglaudatosI.org.ph, and currently our website is livinglaudatosI.ph, and we'll be having a new website again. So we, in behalf of Living Laudato Si Philippines, the Global Catholic Climate Movement, Greenpeace, Philippine Association of Campus Students, Advisors, and PH Lab, I would like to thank Karen Ibasco, who is also a physicist, Dr. Renzo Guinto, my friend Yeb Sanyo, and also Dr. Bayod. We will make sure that the presentation will be shared, and we'll be editing the video so that your presentation will be included there. And as a closing activity, I would like to invite everyone for the prayer for COVID-19 pandemic, the Oratio Imperata. In the name of the Father,
Oratio Imperata. God our Father, we come to you in our need to ask your protection against the 2019 and coronavirus that has claimed lives and has affected many. We pray for your grace for the people tasked with studying the nature and cause of this virus and its disease, and of stemming the tide of its transmission. Guide the hands and minds of medical experts that they may minister to the sick with competence and compassion, and of those governments and private agencies that must find cure and solution to this epidemic. We pray for those afflicted. May they be restored to health soon. Grant us the grace to work for the good of all and to help those in need. Grant this through our Lord Jesus Christ, your Son, who lives and reigns with you in the unity of the Holy Spirit, God forever and ever. Amen. Mary, help of all Christians, pray for us. Saint Raphael the Archangel, pray for us. Saint Roch, pray for us. Saint Lorenzo Ruiz, pray for us. Saint Pedro Calungsod, pray for us.